Jim Brody. I'm a graduate student here at NC State, and I'd like to take a little time today to talk to you about fire ecology, specifically how fire affects the ecology of one stand or another, and how the presence or absence of fire will promote or discourage different species. And to illustrate this example, we're going to use a fire-suppressed loblolly stand and compare that to a longleaf stand that has relatively frequent, low-intensity fire to maintain that species and its life history requirements. And you'll see that the presence and absence of fire create two totally different stand conditions. Let's have a look. I've got my fire helmet on. Let's talk about fire ecology. The main differences that we're going to look at in these two stands are going to be how fire affects stand composition, stand structure, and we're going to look at seed regeneration. Fire can have a big effect on which species are promoted or inhibited. The presence of fire may be necessary for some species to generate and reproduce under the canopy, whereas the presence of fire may be prohibitive for other species. It may kill the regeneration. So we're going to look at those three things.
Okay guys, here's a site in Durham, North Carolina at Duke Forest. We've got a longleaf stand on the right and we've got a loblolly stand on the left. Immediately you can see the difference, right? The loblolly is a lot thicker, a lot more canopy, a lot more mid-story, a lot more understory. And then on the right hand side you've got the longleaf. The stand is much less dense. The stems are further apart. There's a lot more light coming through. And those are going to be a big deal once we get in the stand and start looking at it. A couple of things about these species. Loblolly is generally not considered a fire-adapted species, and longleaf is considered a fire-dependent species. It needs fire for the cones to open and to prepare the seed bed for the seeds. Let's get into the stand. Okay, here we are inside the stands. We've got some nice descriptor signs for each one. We've got longleaf on the left, loblolly on the right. Our loblolly pine was planted in 1932, pruned in 35, and has had some periodic thinnings since 1948. Our longleaf pine was planted in 1935. It was thinned a few times, and it's had about a 2 to 5 year prescribed burn interval. And they've also done a little bit of hardwood control in there. And here's just a reminder, these are two very different species. The larger longleaf cone on the left and the smaller loblolly cone on the right. These species are very different, and their life history requirements are such that they make good examples for the ecological impact of fire in a stand versus no fire in a stand. Okay, here we are inside the loblolly stand, and we can see that in the absence of fire, the stand has begun to advance in succession. The understory is populated by hardwoods like red maple, sweet gum, oaks, and sassafras, and there's virtually no pine regeneration in the understory due to the lack of disturbance by fire to keep the canopy open and the duff layer down. Okay, here's a view from the forest floor inside the loblolly stand. This is not a pretty sight for a young shade-intolerant species like loblolly pine, and you can see that without disturbance, especially that of fire, hardwood competition has been able to germinate in the accumulated forest litter and shade out the forest. This stand is seceding into a hardwood stand. Here's a look at the forest floor inside the loblolly stand. You can see there's virtually no pine regeneration whatsoever, and there's honestly not much other kind of regeneration. I think that's just grapes on the ground, and you can see that litter and debris or fuels is completely just stacked up on the forest floor. That's a whole lot of fire fuel that could be gotten rid of with some fire. We can see this duff layer in the absence of fire has accumulated to 4 to 6 inches, which is completely prohibitive to the epigeal germination of the lightweight pine seeds. Heavier seeded species like oaks and hickories may fare a little better with their hypogeal germination. And so goes the old saying, if you want oaks, plant pines. Those heavier acorns and hickory nuts can work their way down eventually into that duff layer and germinate downward into the mineral soil. And so in the absence of fire, again, this loblolly stand is progressing into a hardwood stand. And it won't be long before we're saying bye-bye to the loblolly stand, and we can see that it's just completely choked out by these sweet gums, maples, sassafras, and oaks. In the absence of fire, it is absolutely changing it over into a hardwood stand. So what about that longleaf? Well, we'll step across the fire break and have a look, and we can tell immediately that those frequent low-intensity fires have led to a completely different stand structure. The stem density is much lower, and the hardwood competition is significantly less prevalent. There's almost no midstory, and there are even grasses growing on the forest floor. And here's why the grasses are growing on the forest floor: because there's sunlight reaching the forest floor, because in the presence of those fires that eliminates that midstory, that open canopy serves very well to let sunlight down onto the ground for those grasses and forbs. Due to these frequent low-intensity fires, the forest floor is primed for regen. There is sunlight and there is duff light. We can even see some little loblolly seedlings that have floated over are taking advantage of the favorable conditions of the sunlight reaching the forest floor and the reduced duff layer due to frequent fires. Here's a closer look at that duff layer. It's only 1 or 2 inches thick. You can see the bare mineral soil underneath it where I've got it lifted up, and we can see a little longleaf poking through without any trouble at all. So this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the fire adaptations of the longleaf. Here we see the grass stage, and here the adaptation is the tuft of needles actually protects the growing bud in the center. So those low intensity fires may singe those needles, but those needles in turn protect that growing bud, so that seedlings. After the grass stage, the longleaf pines enter the sprinting stage, when they grow upward very quickly, and we think the adaptation is to raise that growing stem above the heat of those low intensity fires, thereby protecting it from damage. Here we have a wonderful example of just how well those frequent low intensity fires maintain the understory and the forest floor for regeneration of shade intolerant species like pines. We actually have a longleaf stump here that has a little loblolly seedling growing out of it. A little seed has floated in from the stand next door and found these conditions so favorable that it's now growing inside the longleaf stump. Okay, we've done it. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding of how the presence or absence of fire can affect stand ecology through composition, structure, and regeneration. Thank you.
There we have it, straight from the beautiful Duke Forest in Durham, North Carolina. We've got longleaf, we've got loblolly, and we've used those to explain how fire affects the ecology of a forest.